started on my laptop screen, ready for the Python scene. All those lines of text so clean, let's code and chase that dream. Python world, here we go. Write the script, let it flow.
In this video, we're going to take a quick look at string formatting, as well as the advanced use of the print function. And we're going to get started with the print function. So far in this course, the only way we've been really using the print command is giving it a bunch of values and having them printed out to the screen. But there are some extra arguments we can use to customize that output a little bit more. So how the print command works by default is we give it some values, each one's a different argument to the print command, and then it prints out these values with one space in between, and then a new line at the end. So if we take a look at this example, of which we should be familiar with by now, we are giving the print A, B, C, D, each one's its own argument, and then we have a second call to the print command where we're outputting 1, 2, 3, 4. After each call to the print command, there is a line break. And in between each value, there is a single space character. This is how print works by default. However, we can change how it works, and we can change those defaults. For example, if we want a different character at the end of each line, we can change that with the named argument end. Now let's take a look at an example. So we still have this A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, but we also have another print line that says hello world now. And we also have what we call a named argument, where we put the name of the argument, an equal sign, and then the value we're sending to it. In this case, we're sending a special value. We're sending the empty string. The empty string is when we have two sets of double quotes with nothing in between them, sort of like blank or nothing. This tells print that instead of printing a line break at the end of each line, it should print nothing. So this will make everything appear on the same line, even though that it was different calls to print that outputted it. So the output in this case would be A space B space C space D, and then instead of a line break, we now just have nothing. So it's now 1 space 2 space 3 space 4, and then again we have a new print command, but again because we removed the line break, it's nothing. It's on the same line, and then we have hello world. So we're removing those line breaks by using end to set it to nothing. But we're not limited to just removing the line break. We can set it to other characters. For example, we are now setting it to 2 tab space characters. And these tab spaces are sort of like a space, but with a little extra width to them. So the output in this case would be A, B, C, D, and then 2 tabs, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 tabs, then hello world, all on the same line because we're no longer outputting that line break. And again, we're not limited to just spaces and line breaks. We can do more interesting things. So in this first one here, we're now putting a double line break. This one, we're going to put out a bunch of asterisks. And this last one, we're going to replace the line break with duck. So what kind of output do you think this is going to have? Pause the video, and once you think you have an answer, unpause.
Flying lines in haste, got to run, no time to waste. Syntax green lights turning right, Python dreams in late night light. Loops and flows, recursive call. See it now, we'll break the wall. Data points, they twist and glow. Fast forward, run, let's watch it grow. Python tapes rewind the mind, bits and bytes they all align. Screen is flicker, lines unwind. Fast forward code, let's hit rewind. Tapes rewind the mind, bits and bytes they all align.
Okay, hopefully you have an answer. Let's see if it's the same as what it is. So here's the output. So first we have A, B, C, D, and instead of just one line break, we get two now, because we replace the end with two line breaks. So we get that extra blank line. Now for the next print line, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and instead of a line break, we get a bunch of asterisks, because that's what we replace them with. And then for the last one, we get hello world, and instead of a line break, we now get the word duck. So by changing this end argument, we can customize this a little bit, as well as do multiple prints that end up on the same line. It gives us a little more flexibility. But there is a second optional argument that we can use with print, and that is SEP, which stands for separator. And this changes how print separates the different values on the same line by default. Remember, by default, it's a single space. So in this example, we are replacing the separator from a single space to an empty string. So this is going to remove the spaces between the values. So the output in this case is going to be AB, CD with no spaces in between it. We didn't mess with end at all, so we get the default line break. And on the next line, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 with no spaces in between. But just like with end, we are not limited to just removing the separator. We can replace it with other things. So in this first line, we're replacing it with a single dash. And in the second line, we're replacing it with 3 asterisks. So when we actually print this out, what do you think is going to happen? Again, pause the video. Once you think you have an answer, unpause it and check your work.
Tapes rewind the mind, bits and bytes they all align. Screen is flicker, lines unwind. Fast forward code, let's hit rewind. It's time to go. Quick adjustments, watch it flow. Backwards, forward, code is prime. In the fast lane, losing time.
Okay, let's see. So in this case, we get A dash B dash C dash D. And for the second line, we replaced it with 3 asterisks. So between each value, we get 3 asterisks. So 1, asterisk, 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 2, and so on. Now, when we put this all together, we can do some interesting things. In the example we have on the screen right now, we're using end and sep to format some usernames into a comma-separated list of @UWO emails. So let's see what's going on here. So this means between each value, we're going to get @UWO.ca. And if you look closely, you can see there's a comma and then a space after that. So after dservos5 @UWO.ca, after jblog6, and after jblack and dwight. Notice it doesn't have cool guy and Alice highlighted. That's because the separator character only goes between values, not at the end of values. To get the @UWO.ca and the comma at the end of the other 2 usernames, we need to use the end parameter because they're the end of those print lines. So in blue right here, that @UWO.ca and then a comma space is added to coolguy32 here because it's at the end of that line. The other one is going to be for the last name, Alice7. In this case, we don't have the space and the comma at the end because it's at the end of the line. So by combining both end and sep arguments, we can get really interesting results and outputs, and it can help format your code a little bit. Okay, now we're going to go on to a few ways we can format strings in Python. And the first one is going to be f strings, And this is one of the newest ways to format strings that's been added to Python. So formatting a string that contains several values, for example, if we want to output that with print, can be a bit of a pain because we're limited to using string concatenation. So for example, let's say we want to output something like hello, whatever your name is, you are whatever your age is, years old, and have an account balance of whatever the account balance is as of today. We could do something like this, where we have this big long print line and a bunch of string concatenations going on it. And then we also have to cast those integer and floating point values back to string before we can add them. But that's a bit of a pain. It looks ugly and it's easy to make bugs and mistakes. We could also use the print command, give them all a separate value. At least we don't have to do casting there, but that's a bit of a pain and we have to manipulate that separator to get the spacing right. Again, it's not that much better, and it's still a bit ugly and hard to deal with. And these statements can be quite confusing and hard to understand. So what is an alternative approach we could take? Well, that is f-strings. And f-strings were added in Python 3.6, and they provide a more elegant, easier to use, and more powerful method of formatting strings. So all f-strings in Python start with an f at the beginning, right before the double quotes, or single quotes if you like single quotes. And what they do is they interpolate values into the string. So what does that mean? It means it's taking values and it's packing them into the string, sort of like we were doing manually with concatenation operator, but this does it in a little bit more user-friendly way using brackets. Let's take a look at an example. So that's the same example we saw before, but now we're using an f string. So do note that there is a f at the beginning of the string. That tells Python that this is an f string. That f isn't part of the string, it's just to denote that this is a special type of string. Then inside this string, you might see something a little bit different. We have these brackets, and inside those brackets, we can include any kind of expression. So in this case, they are variable names. So that's going to retrieve the variable name, in this case, the variable name name, and it's going to put it in the string right there. The second one is going to retrieve the variable name age, put it right there. And the last is going to retrieve the variable name money and put it right in there. So the output would look something like this, assuming we had the value Daniel for name, the value 38 for age, and the value 120.3423457 for money. So this makes it really easy. You don't have to worry about casting. You don't have to worry about concatenating strings or messing with the print function. You can just type it as you want with these brackets, and Python will put the values in for you, so long as you have Python 3.6 or newer. But as I said, it could be any expression. So we're not just limited to variable names. We can also embed other things in here. For example, we could use the upper function to convert name into uppercase by creating a new string that's in all uppercase and then put it right into the other string. Or we could even do some math in here, like 10 times 3 plus 8. And this would produce the following output, assuming name equals Daniel. So turned Daniel into all uppercase, and it inputted 38. That's the result of 10 times 3 plus 8. So any kind of expression can go between those brackets. Yep, and this is just showing them again. So f-strings also support some more advanced features, such as format specifiers, and they give us more control out of the output and how Python's going to interpret the values we send to it. So for example, let's say we have a money value that's like 120.3473457. Maybe we want to round that so we get an output like this, 120.35. So it's rounded up to the second decimal point. Well, we can add a format specifier onto the end, which is a :.2f, which tells it to round this floating point number up to 2 decimal points. That 2 represents how many decimal places to round to. So 0.1 would be 1, 0.0 would be no decimal places, and like 0.3 would be 3 decimal places. So these format specifiers are quite powerful, and there's many different ones for integers, for strings, and a whole bunch of different things, including even small things like adding commas in numbers. We won't be going in depth into format specifiers in this video, but if you are interested, I have a few resources here. And these are things like a cheat sheet, a guide, as well as the formal specification for the mini language. So if you're interested, please check them out. One thing I also have is a list of the most common ones here. These can also be found in the slides for this video, and they include things like the integer format, the floating point format, which we saw, string formatting, as well as how you can get commas in them, different alignments, and zero filling numbers. Now, the other method we're going to be taking a look at is string interpolation using the modulo operator. That's that %sign. Now, you may remember the modulo operator from a previous video where we're using it to find the remainder. Well, when we use that on strings, it has a different function. When it's used on strings, it becomes yet another way to format strings, and it replaces placeholder values found in the strings with variable values. And we can see an example of that on the screen right now. So we have a name set to Alice, an age set to 30, and money set to this amount here that we saw from the previous example. Now, on the next line, we have greeting equals, and it looks like a normal string, except for in this string, we have a few interesting placeholders. There's %s, %d, and %.2f. And you can see also on the screen that I list some of these common placeholders. %s is for string, %d is for integer, and %f is for a floating point number. And what you may have guessed is this modulo operator takes values from a tuple, that's that list that you can see on the right with name, age, and money, and it inserts them in the string in the same order. So in this example, name would go into this %s here, age would go into the %d here, and money would go into the %.2f. And it's not matching them based on the placeholder, it's matching them based on the order. So name is going to go in whatever's first, age goes in whatever's second, and money goes in whatever's third, because that's the order they are in that tuple. Now, it is important here that the types are correct. You can get errors or gibberish data if you don't match the types correctly. Also, just like we saw in the last example with f strings, we can control the number of decimal places using this 0.2 notation. So 0.2 would mean 2 decimal places, 0.1, 1 decimal place, 0.0, no decimal places, and it rounds them to the correct amount. So what does this output? Well, it outputs, hello Alice, you are 30 years old and have $120.35. And this is done just by inserting those variables like we just saw. So we're not going to go too in depth into string interpolation using the modulo operator, because this is more of an outdated way of doing it, and it has less readability and is less convenient. The other way to format strings we're going to talk about is the format method. So the format method is one of the string methods that were provided as part of the string class that we can use on any string, and it gives us a way to interpolate values into strings, sort of like fstring, but in some ways it's a little bit more useful because it allows us to make templates and then fill them in as we need them. And we can use the format method in one of 3 different ways. We can use it as empty replacement fields, we can use it as replacement fields with zero-based indices, or we can do it with replacement fields with named arguments. So that probably sounds a little bit confusing right now. Let's take a look at some examples where it'll be more clear. So in this case, we want to send an email out to all the students in our class to let them know the course site is ready. And maybe we're programming this for a learning management system, so we want it to be generic, so it'll work for any course, any student. We don't want to have to write a string for every single student and every single course. That would be a mess. So what we do is we make a little string template. This is just a normal string that you've seen before, except in the string there's a few places where we have these little empty brackets because we're doing the empty replacement field method. And what's going to happen is when we call the format method, it's going to take a few different arguments. These arguments are going to be equal to the values that we want to replace those brackets with. And the way this works is each bracket is replaced in the same order we give it the values. So in this case, Daniel is first, so it replaces the first bracket. CS1026 is second, so it replaces the second. Fall is third, so it goes in the third. And 2038 is last, so it goes in the last bracket. What this actually does is it actually creates a brand new string that has these values inserted into it. In this case, because we have that in the print function, it's going to output that to the screen. So we will get something that looks like this. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to CS1026. Your course site is now available for the fall 2038 term. I guess far in the future. And what is really powerful about this is we can then use this for another student and another course without editing that email template at all. We just send new values in using the format method. So that's what this next line does here, except it sends in the values for Alice, CS2212, Winter, and 2029. And that output would look something like this. Hello Alice, welcome to CS2212. Your course site is now available for the Winter 2029 term. What's great about this is we can just keep reusing that template, so we could just use it for any student and we would have a new nice string made. So let's look at the other methods of using format. Remember, we also said there was an indices one and an argument name one. So here's the same example, but with using the indices method. What you might notice right away is that instead of just empty brackets, we now have numbers in those brackets, and these represent indices. So this time, instead of just putting them in the same order, we don't put CS1026 first, we put them in the order of the indices given. So we can see CS1026 is first, so that it means it's at index 0. So it goes wherever there shows index 0 in the template. At index 1 is 2038, so wherever there's a bracket with 1 in it, it's going to be replaced with 2038. And wherever there's a bracket with 2 in it, it's going to be replaced with Daniel. And wherever there's a bracket with 3 in it, it's going to be replaced with Vol. And it's going to make the exact same string we saw before, but now we're giving the values in a different order to format. This would also let us repeat those values if we wanted to, or put them in any order we wish. So the last method was replacement fields with named arguments. So this time, instead of numbers, we actually have words in there. And these sort of act like variable names, except they are going to be named arguments to the format method now. So you can see we have course equals CS1026, name equals Daniel, year equals 2038, and term equals fall. So what it's going to do is wherever it has name in brackets, it's going to look at the argument for name, and it's going to put that value there. This also means that they can come in any order each time we're using the template. You can see for Alice below that they come in a completely different order, but because they're named, they're going to end up in the right spot, and we're still going to get the same strings. So this can be extremely powerful, and you could see how this would be great for email templates, maybe even websites, where you always have the same sort of template, but you want to put in different string values, and you can keep reusing that over and over again. So far we have covered 3 different ways of doing string interpolation in Python. But which one should you use, and which one is better? Well, I have a nice table here that compares all of the different ways. We've got the modulo operator, the string format method, as well as f-strings. And there isn't one correct answer here. These are 3 ways of doing the same thing with a few slight differences. And it is a highly debated topic with Python programmers, which one's best. If you ask any Python programmer, they'll probably have a different answer or a different personal favorite. But there are a few important differences. First off, in terms of readability, the modulo operator is probably the least readable. It's the least elegant way of doing it. Then the string format method's a little bit better, but probably the best and most readable and intuitive way is using f-strings. Allows you to just put the variable names or expression right in there. Now, another important difference is that f-strings allow you to embed expressions directly in the string, sort of like when we saw that example of like adding 2 numbers or multiplying 2 numbers right in the string. Other ones don't have that option. Another difference is with type safety. So with that modulo operator, we do have to get the types correct, or we're going to get an error or some gibberish data. String format and f-strings tend to be a little bit more forgiving, as they don't necessarily require you to specify the format, although you can do that when you start getting into the string formatting mini language. In terms of performance, there probably isn't that much of a difference, especially for the things we'll be doing in this course. Generally, f-strings tend to be a little bit faster. And one of the biggest differences is going to be with templates and reuse. As we saw in that previous example with the format method, we could reuse that string over and over again and put new values into it. It could be extremely useful if we had a program sending out emails or something, or displaying text over and over again where it's just changing a few values. However, f-strings don't support that. There is no built-in sort of template support like that. So in that case, if you're doing something like a template, you'd probably want to go with .format. The modulo operator can sort of be used for that, but it's pretty limited and inflexible. The last thing I'll mention is it does somewhat depend on what version of Python you're using. F-strings were added in Python 3.6, which most people should be using now, but if you're using an older version of Python, like Python 2, you're not going to have f-string support. The string format method was added in Python 2.7. Most people should be on that by now. And the oldest method would be the modulo operator. It's pretty old, some people feel it's outdated, but it is still in use and still is supported. That's all I have for you in this video about string formatting and the advanced use of the print function. Remember, there isn't one correct way to do string interpolation in Python. You should use the way that works best for you, unless you have some special requirement like templating, or you're using an older version of Python where you don't have support for things like f-strings. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.